welcome in to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for The Free. I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host and colleague, Reiner Sabin. He's our Big Ten insider. We've also got sports editor and podcast producer Andrew Burkle with us as well, who always helps us get things going. Time of taping, this is Wednesday afternoon, just before 2 p.m. on November 1st. It feels more important than ever that we are time-stamping these things because stories are coming in left and right. And of course, that's what we're here for. We're here to get all the latest surrounding Michigan football on and off the field, more off the field in the past 10 days, frankly, than on the field. But before we do, did you guys get to do any weekend, anything? Did you enjoy it, Reiner?
Yeah, I mean, I got a little time away. Spent part of the weekend watching the Michigan State game, which was not a fun exercise in football spectating, I would say. That was kind of a ugly game overall, and just not something you would enjoy typically as a football fan, regardless of who you were rooting for. But it was somewhat of a painful exercise. But yeah, I managed to get through it, and then had a pleasant Sunday where football really wasn't the priority.
Bye week for the Michigan writers, not the bye week for the editors. So I was still working, watching that incredibly painful game, as Reiner mentioned. So I mean, it's football season, though. Who can complain about sitting and watching football?
Right. But also for you as an editor, on a Sunday with no Lions too, right? This will be consecutive Sundays with no Lions. I mean, it's not because the Lions played Monday. They beat the Raiders, and then it's a bye week this week. So a little bit.
A little reprieve, yeah. I mean, and also no Michigan means half the amount of work on Saturday there. So yeah, I mean, still definitely slower than your typical Saturday Sunday. So yeah, I got a little rest.
Right. Well, just because Michigan did not play on Saturday, as Andrew just alluded to, does not mean Michigan has not been in the headlines. Far from it. I think you could say the epicenter of the football world has sort of been Ann Arbor this last week with the sign stealing investigation, Connor Stalions, and all the layers and tentacles that are now evolving out of that. That's what we're talking about today. Michigan plays Purdue. They're favored by 32.5. They're going to win somewhere around that much. We'll decide if we think more or less in the second segment with the picks. But until then, this is going to be about big picture. This is going to be about this active investigation, maybe a little bit the first investigation, and just sort of how they play together, because they do, in the sense of Jim Harbaugh, his perception, his relationship with the board, with the athletic directors, with the fans. We might not get to everything, but we're trying to. And what we will certainly do is talk about the latest. And what that is right now is their new evidence came out yesterday that Central Michigan University is investigating a person of interest on the sideline from their season opening game against Michigan State University. Photos and videos have surfaced. And the person who they are investigating is rumored to be Connor Stalions, Michigan's former suspended recruiting analyst, staffer. Reiner, this would take this to yet even another level. Should it prove to be Stalions? I think, is that a good place to start? Is there anywhere else you want to go?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, yeah, it's a very strange story. I mean, and it's interesting that Central Michigan wasn't able to immediately confirm or deny that information, which leads you to believe that there may be something to it based on the comments even that Jim McElwain made after the game against Northern Illinois on Wednesday night. As far as like they're looking into it, he referred to this person as the sign stealing guy, and so it was again, it leads you to believe that there might be some truth to what this is, which would again add another chapter to this bizarre story where maybe this is going beyond just Michigan games. I mean, influencing other aspects of college football, other teams and such, and then expands the scope of what this whole scandal might entail. And so I think it's not good for Michigan, again, that this is potentially larger than what we even initially thought it was.
It certainly does lead to a lot of questions, as you said, Reiner. And one of them, as you were saying, I don't know if it's as much a question as much as it is a thought. You would think, should that have been someone on Central Michigan staff, like you said, it looks like a male, would pretty quickly be able to be identified who that was and why they were there. So you just that's certainly not helping the optics of the situation. And this is something else we're navigating, right, Reiner? Because you don't want to not report on something, right? Like we were writing about that story and looking into that story the night before and in the morning, but it was just photos of a guy who looked like a guy, right? But once Central Michigan was investigating, then it's like, okay, now this is more than just optics. And that's part of the unusual nature of this story, right? So last night, Tuesday, we were all in Schembechler Hall waiting to speak to players. And this is my second season on the Michigan beat. But you've been in college athletics and professional athletics for more than a decade, I think 15 plus years. We were talking to other reporters from other places who've covered Michigan going on 10 years, some in other cases, decades, right? And everybody said, I think pretty much everybody, I didn't hear anybody who didn't say, no one's ever quite seen anything like this, which is why even the conversation around it can be difficult for us, right? When you're actually attached to something and you're not some nameless person on Twitter that can just say anything and do anything, right? And so I think that nuance is part of the discussion and how quickly this is developing. Right? Just the unknown.
I mean, there's a lot of unknown. I mean, there are allegations now. I mean, the allegations seem to be backed up by seriously pointed reporting that would, lead you to draw conclusions that something was afoot, here. I mean, and so it's, but it's also difficult. I mean, again, as a journalist, I mean, you're trying to, look at it from the standpoint of where, Michigan is 8-0. They're ranked number 2 in the country, number 3 in the playoff rankings right now, and they look the part of a championship team. But then you have this subplot that's in the background that's pretty influential as far as like how you view the team itself, and so you can't ignore what's going on here. And yet, at the same token, you're trying to cover a team as objectively as you can based on the results that have already been seen. And it's an incredibly difficult position. And I've been very conflicted about how to go about it myself. I mean, it's, and I think a lot of people are wrestling with that, how they should view Michigan and whether this is really something that is affecting how Michigan should be evaluated going forward.
Well, your question about perception, which you asked to Jesse Minter, which I thought was a great question, which I know you're talking about right now as well, I think is really going to, you're right, there are two different lenses people are sort of, I don't know about looking at, well, there's certainly different lenses people are looking at this through, but there are also some different schools of thought emerging. I guess let me explain. So there was a poll in The Athletic that polled 50 anonymous coaches around the country, asking them about sort of 1 to 5, their level of concern related to this scandal. The average score, 5 being, this is very serious, 1 being nothing to see here, right? The average score was 4.2. All but 2 of the coaches rated it at 3 or higher, right? And 23 of them, that's 23 out of 50, so nearly half, gave it a full 5 out of 5. So it's one thing for Deion Sanders or someone else to not want to break the coaching fraternity rules, right? Of going against your guy or someone like coach. I mean, there is a brotherhood in the coaching, unless, I mean, if you're rivals, you have some beef, of course, that's separate. But just like quarterbacks aren't going to take digs at other quarterbacks, Deion's and different coaches you heard publicly say like, well, it's one thing to like someone can know what I'm going to do. They still got to stop it, right? Well, it's like, okay, well, how about you try that, right? Go give someone your playbook for a half and see how it works for you. That's where I have long thought about. And now when coaches are polled anonymously, right, which of course, it's why they're going to be like, yeah, this is a big deal. Now, also, because they're polled anonymously, you have to take it with a little grain of salt, right? They may try to jack it up and be like, yeah, like look over there. And so, but this does seem to be a pretty big deal. But any way you measure it, a very, very big deal.
Absolutely. It strikes at the fundamentals of the game. I mean, the game of football comes down to play calling and execution. That's how you evaluate the coaches. Like, are they good at teaching the fundamentals? Well, usually some coach is usually good at one or the other. I mean, if they're good at both, then you've got a real extremely good coach. And so a guy who can, again, teach the fundamentals well, can teach execution. You know, a lot of people say, it doesn't matter what play you call. If you execute it really well, it's good. But I mean, a big part of it is play calling. I mean, that's what we talk about with Kyle Shanahan and Ben Johnson with the Lions now. I mean, it's like, play calling is really important. So if you have a cheat sheet or you have a idea of what's coming, I mean, that has a huge effect on the game. And so, yes, I think it's an extremely big deal as far as how it relates to how you watch football and, contextualize what is going on. So, yeah, those are the two fundamental prongs in football to me.
Right. If play calling doesn't matter, right? Why is Cade McNamara at Iowa saying something like when he's not throwing to wide receivers at all? He's like, look, I'm running the play that's called, right? That the whole football is what's called. It is all about scheming and responding and the chess match of what the other team is doing and how you respond to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it strikes at the fundamental part of the game. Yeah.
And just to chime in here as well, the other thing that I think we have to keep in mind with this story is how much it's changed since Deion Sanders' comments when it first broke. When this story first came out, initial reactions were like, oh, NCAA coming after Harbaugh again, sign stealing, like it's just one of those gray areas. But then you keep peeling back the onion one layer at a time. One, Stalions in the field of Michigan State, the budget that was part of the Wall Street Journal report. It just keeps getting more and more, I guess, serious would be the right word. And you don't see as many coaches coming to defend the Michigan and the sign stealing anymore as when it first broke. And I think that's important to keep in mind because as the three of us and other journalists who have been following it, like this isn't just the sign stealing scandal. You kind of hear that from people outside of the media who are like, oh, yeah, Michigan was stealing signs. Everyone's doing it. Well, that's only a part of the story. It keeps getting deeper and deeper. You know what I mean?
And I think if you look at the level of this and the reaction of coaches around going back to this athletic poll, which was a good job by them. Obviously they do a lot of great work as well. It speaks to the nature of this is not everywhere, right? Like coaches are not saying things are an average of 4.2 out of 5 levels serious about any ticky-tack, this or that. Like, let's not even leave the program. Let's ask about the very first violations. I would wager, should the same 50 coaches be polled about Michigan's the first NCAA investigation, right? Like an analyst serving in an on-field capacity, or say, and like even back to like it.
Well, a lot of people, I mean, speaking of the analysts, a lot of people say, well, the analysts coach everywhere. So, like, I mean, that's a common discussion point in there's an abuse of that across the board. I mean,
and Michigan is not the only program to contact recruits during a dead period. It's against the rules. It's taboo, but they are not the only one to do it. However, they do have more of a microscope on them under anything. Like so even if there's truth to the fact that Michigan has more of a microscope to this, and even if there is truth to the fact that there are programs all over the nation who are doing different unscrupulous things, that's not the point. Like, that's missing the mark, in my estimation. If you are serious about your program and the way it should be operating within the morals of the game, and this would be true for any team. And that's why the questions of how you move forward are serious. I mean, you can only hope, and really, really hope, if you're Michigan, that somehow as few people, I don't know how something to this magnitude that has these layers would be kept secret within a staff, right? Within everyone from the staff. So it's really picking apart who knew, and you just gotta hope it's as few people as possible. I mean,
if you're Michigan, yes.
Right, right.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean,
and I think everyone. I think all fans of college football should hope for that. Of course, Ohio State fans are going to hope that Jim Harbaugh led it, and Michigan State, you know what I mean? But this is not good for the sport, and I would just hate to see a team. I mean, a team we cover, a team that has enjoyed a remarkable turnaround, that has, I mean, really enjoyed a renaissance. I mean, how could you not be? And just the essence of the game, how could you not be upset just on a fundamental level if the game that we all know and love and think of as a relief, as something that is fair, if there were layers and knowledge of it not being fair, that's upsetting to me. If there is not knowledge of it, then
we watch sports because we want to see competition played out with everybody abiding by the same rules, and that we feel like every team has a fair shot, and that's that's why we watch college football. I mean, we even the idea that you can have a program like Alabama get upset by Northern Illinois or whatever. I mean, it's just the idea that on any given day, that everybody's got a fair shot. And if, it also strikes to the idea that again, I mean, Michigan is a program that, has advantages over a lot of teams. And if they have to go to this, I mean, that's also kind of would annoy a lot of fans, I think, too. I mean, that a program of this magnitude would have to resort to these kind of tactics if that's the case. Now, I mean, the perception problem, I think, with Michigan is pretty big, and it could end up, going on and getting worse as it goes on. I mean, now the playoff committee right now, it says they're not really considering the Science doing allegations into their whole calculus as far as determining these teams. It's CFP Executive Director Bill Hancock said Michigan has played well all season. The fact of the matter is no one knows what happened. The NCAA is dealing right now with allegations only. The committee makes its judgments based on what happened on the field, and clearly Michigan has a dominant team. Yes, I think that's true. I don't know how much that's going to be able to continue if the public feels like this team, their results are somewhat invalidated. Now, the good thing for Michigan is that they have Penn State and Ohio State to prove that. And you made that point before we got on this podcast that, it'll probably be settled on the field ultimately. And if Michigan shows that they can beat both of these teams, then, they'll determine. But whether that's enough to sway the masses and even the coaching establishment in the sport, whether Michigan should be, punished, for what has gone on before then, assuming that these allegations are true, then that's another subject too. So I don't know how it's all going to play out. I do wonder if public pressure is going to start mounting though, and is going to influence the committee going forward, because I don't think it's something they can necessarily ignore.
Well, a few things. One, it's a 13-person committee. Remember,
Sure.
One of those 13 voices is Ward Manuel,
Right.
Michigan's athletic director, right? So they have someone certainly on their side, on the inside track. So for what that's worth, Michigan's
Sure.
voice will always be heard in that discussion. That's one. Two, the CFP is separate from the NCAA. And like all big money organizations, they are going to be thinking about bottom line too. And they have said, look, as you just read, we're dealing with what's on the field. We're going to, and it's pretty par for the course. It's how you would expect something like this would act. Now, if this is a different brand, I wonder, and I'm not saying it's right. I do think as you get closer, you shouldn't want there to have to be a retroactive asterisk. However, you need, I mean, if I mean, the other option is not letting Michigan, like, should Michigan qualify for that? I just couldn't see a scenario where Michigan's not allowed to play unless more comes out than has come out now.
Well,
Just because it's so quick. Nobody, like, the NCAA moves at a glacial pace in
absolutely. Yeah. But again, this is a larger question as like, if they aren't punished, assuming these, again, allegations are true, then what does that say to the rest of the sport? I mean, is this okay? I mean, are coaches just going to be like, well, we're just going to do whatever we feel like going forward, and like, because we know that we're not going to be punished in real time, it'll just happen retroactively.
Well, I think coaches have always known that. No one's ever been punished in real time. That has always been
right.
But I do think you're right that pressure is going to get turned up, and it comes from people like earlier this morning, it will have been yesterday or earlier when people are listening to this, but Paul Feinbaum, right? Who kind of surprisingly, at least initially, seemed to go to bat for Jim Harbaugh in this case. And I remember we talked about it. We were like, that was kind of just given the nature of their relationship. Not that it's odd that someone might not think, like, I mean, anyone can have their own opinion of this matter, right? Now, it does seem to be that people who wear one color have one thought, people who wear another color have another thought, but there are some lines that cross. But when people like, is Paul Feinbaum the biggest college football voice? Maybe personality. I mean,
really one of them.
He's on the short list, right?
Yeah, him, Herb Street. And
I don't know if he said him by name, but
Joel
he said, like,
Tony.
He was calling out Tony Petitti and the Big Ten Conference about what they're going to do about it. And when that happens, you think they got to make at least a statement or something soon, just as far as how they're going to handle it.
And if there is any punishment, it's likely will be coming from the Big Ten. They're the only ones who probably can do anything, as far as Michigan's concerned. I mean, I just, wonder what goes into that decision process. I mean, obviously they're kind of have to do some investigating themselves to find the basis of it. But I mean, your constituency includes Michigan and 13 other Big Ten schools. And so is there going to be pressure from the vast majority of the conference to do something? I mean, that's the question. And, does Petitti want to weigh that against the idea of having two potential Big Ten teams in the college football playoff, which would be good for the conference? There's a lot of things to weigh on his end, as far as how much he really wants to push forward with this.
But you have to be beyond a shadow of a doubt positive of everything, right? And just think of, I mean, as we've talked to, I don't know, sometimes I forget what we've said on air and off air, but the players. Think about how unfair it is to the players on this team, perception or otherwise, right? And should there be punished? And I mean, Roman Wilson, he said, like he said it. We had talked to him on Monday. He said it's always been something since he's been here in 2020. And I mean, there have been a lot of storylines around this program. I mean, going back that far. I mean, just look at the last 12 months, right? I mean, we've enumerated them many times on this podcast. And I thought it was interesting because what he was saying is, look, people have always been trying to come for us, right? There's always been naysayers and doubters and attackers. It has brought us closer together. We are the buffalo waiting for the storm to pass. He gave us that analogy, that visual, how Michigan sort of come together and all those things. But what I also heard him say is that it is always something, and that there is constantly something going on around this program, some of which is, and like I said earlier, maybe there is a target on their back, and maybe they're held to a different standard. Like, even if those things are true, if you're also doing things that are against the rules, then there's no longer a leg to stand on. And I think you've made the point before, Jim Harbaugh, like, eventually you've just lost the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
But that's the public perception part, which fortunately for Michigan doesn't matter. And that's all they've said. It's like, look, outside is outside. Obviously, as a human, like I asked Grant Newsom today, the tight ends coach, as like a person, does it affect you? It's what we've tried to ask them all. And he's like, yeah, like eventually it does. But he's like, luckily we know we've all got each other, and that's what they have to hold on to. And they've said it to a man. And to this point, every distraction before this, whether it's a quarterback battle or an inappropriate tweet or social media or a coach firing or an investigation, they have said we are focused on one thing, and they've been focused on one thing.
I disagree, though. I mean, like, in some of the ways that they portray it as like they're being attacked, I think a lot of this stuff is self-inflicted. I mean, all of it. All of it, I think, is mostly self-inflicted. I mean, pretty much all of it is. Pretty much all of it is self-inflicted. I mean, obviously, if you're staying within the boundaries you're not going to be subjected to these kind of things. But there's a guy, regardless of whether they knew, that's been put your program in a compromised situation right now, and as it's alleged, and currently he's been suspended by your staff or something. So as they're investigating whether this is indeed happened, but I mean, again, it's like this. I mean, the reports are pretty sensational in a lot of ways, but again, it's not coming from. I mean, the media didn't drum this up or anything, or these outside, haters didn't drum it up. It's coming from within the program potentially, where this potential, sign stealing ring was hatched. I mean, it's like and the person that's at the center of it is directly tied to your program, was a diehard Michigan fan before that, and it's kind of worked his way up from a volunteer to now a full-time staff member, and so it has Michigan all the way through and through.
And Frank, and I mean, to bring it full circle back to the Central Michigan and Michigan State part of the investigation, it seems like it can't be both ways, right? Like today we heard from Grant Newsom about how tight the coaching staff is, right? About how close-knit everyone is, how there's not factions, right? How there's no one he can't go to and have a conversation with. If that's the case, and also at the same time, inside Schembechler Hall and different things, I mean, there have been videos surfacing of Connor Stalions right next to Jesse Minter talking on sidelines, seemingly, or interacting, right? There are murals all over Schembechler Hall celebrating the past few years. They redid the digs, and it looks really cool inside there, obviously. One of them is at Ohio State. It's a big picture. It's the whole defense. And two of the front and center I'll just focus on one. One person in the middle of all the key defensive players from last year is Connor Stalions. And he's holding up his shirt and has a turnover bust shirt on. And I mean, he's in the middle of I don't know if it was a turnover picture, of some key picture with a lot of big people at Ohio State last year as well, right? And so the reason I'm saying that is he's certainly more important than he was initially played. I think that's clear. But also, there's a level of plausible deniability. Should he have been orchestrating this thing and sending other people to other places? If that turns out to be him physically on the sideline at Central versus Michigan State, as serious as this already was, for me, that chain, I mean, I don't know. It's the next level of internal knowledge that should have been there. This is not someone sending someone to do something at another place. This is him physically going somewhere the night before the game. Should it turn out to be him? That needs to be clear.
Right. And that would be, again, it's a bizarre story, and it's a hard one to cover because, again, right now there's allegations and there's no proof from a third party that's just laid out there for everybody to see and judge on their own, on his own merits. Again, this is the problem with the NCAA too. It's not transparent. The investigative process is not transparent. It's not a legal process that how we're used to it. So there's no formal charges. You don't get to see a police document.
Michigan hasn't even been presented with a notice of allegations, and so the 90-day window hasn't even started.
And so it's just so hard to do. But I mean, it's just I mean, it becomes a perception issue again of what you believe and what the optics are. And in this sport, optics are everything. I mean, we don't determine who gets to play for the championship where humans are involved. I mean, this is not done on the field. I mean, it's not the NFL where you win your division and where you earn a wild card spot and go to the playoffs and then fight it out to the end. You're chosen to compete. You're ranked. The rankings matter. I mean, nobody cares about NFL rankings during the season because it has no bearing on how it's going to play out. But it does factor in college football, and so. To me, perception is everything, and that's where I think Michigan is a little bit, in a difficult spot right now. Because I mean,
but
again,
but given that is a difficult aspect, given that in other sports there's no option, it's just in or out. But the two things Michigan has going for it, which you alluded to earlier, which we talked about offline, one, Penn State and Ohio State are still ahead of them.
Yep.
That is, and there is no chance that those games will be compromised. Beyond to what level things have already been compromised, right? But certainly there is ample time for teams to change their signs, to do things. All eyes will be on Michigan, right? One would think those are very even, fair games, as we hope to be, right? So if you're Michigan, you leave no doubt. You have to leave no doubt in those games, just to start helping your perception, right? But the other thing that's going for them, the college football we've said it a couple times. The college football playoff committee has already planted its flag on its perception of Michigan, and that is the perception that matters.
Yes, for now. And I'm just saying, I'm curious to see, again, as it goes on, where we're at. Because again, the Athletic article came out today. Within the industry, within itself, the college football world. I don't know. It's just. The question is what do you do here if these, allegations are substantiated? It's going to be a problem because and it should increase the motivation to get to the bottom of it. It should push them to want to go really deep into this immediately and find out as much as they can. I don't think for the health of the game that that anybody can just sit back and just allow the process to play out the process needs to be expedited.
And that goes for every layer of this, which also goes for whatever that outside investigation is that initially presented this to the NCAA. We do need to know who that is. I agree. It's not the main question, but it's a question, and it is a question that we need answered because of the Pandora's box it could open. Should it have been one of these conspiracy theories, Ohio State, what have you, right? Not suggest, and so I'm saying, just to play fair, if we want we need to get questions answered for everything.
I agree.
Not suggesting that you wouldn't, but it's just.
Oh yeah.
And everyone should want that, right? It's one of the things that drives me crazy, not to get Sean Windsor on everybody and get philosophical. But it's just a greater societal thing. Let's let truth be truth, whatever it is, right? And then act accordingly. That's just my person, who I am personally, and I think that's just how it should be. Final thoughts, Reiner.
Just in general. I'm curious to see how this is going to evolve further, and how Michigan, responds to it going forward. Again, we're not going to see probably much from the Purdue game as far as, what Michigan, obviously it's going to be the week after against Penn State that we'll really see how Michigan deals with this, especially in their first road game. It's technically their second road game since this thing broke, but the first one since this really has become mushroomed into a whole new thing. And it's also against by far their most challenging competition yet. So, I think, we're not going to really get the full understanding of how Michigan is going to handle this whole thing until that week. And it's such an important week on so many levels for a lot of different reasons.
Yep. And we'll get there. And one of the games we will talk about briefly is Michigan-Purdue. We'll bring in Andrew Burkle as well to make some of the picks. It's been a little while since we've done that, so don't go away. This is Hail Yes. All right, everybody. The gang's all here again. I'm hoping the bye week did not destroy just what was some red hot momentum from yours truly that I know everybody cares about greatly. Andrew, catch everybody up, if you will, where we're at, and then take us away.
Well, coming into the last time we did picks, Tony was below 500 2 times ago. And then he got one game above 500, and now he is 3 games above 500. So can confirm Tony has been on a little bit of a heater, as much as we hate to say it. Reiner's still sitting 1 game below 500, 13, 14, and 4, and then I'm in a dead square tie with Tony myself. So lots on the line here, and let's start with the game that everyone on this podcast will care about the most: Michigan hosting Purdue. Reiner, you hinted at your opinions on this game, but who do you think might get away with this one here?
Yeah, Andrew. I mean, this just looks like a game that Michigan's going to be able to take care of easily. I mean, Purdue is 2-6. They don't have a really high-powered offense. New coaching staff. I mean, they look like a team that's far inferior to Michigan. And the way that Michigan's taking care of inferior teams this year doesn't give me much hope that the Boilermakers can keep it close. I mean, they had this reputation, obviously, as the spoiler makers. That was formed under the Jeff Brom era. This is a new era under Ryan Walters. I don't know why that would necessarily carry over to this. So I just don't have much faith that the Boilermakers can make this game close. And Michigan is just, firing on all cylinders with the way that they're playing. I mean, the 49-0 victory over Michigan State, again, was more evidence that they're just kind of bulldozing opponents. I mean, each of the Big Ten games, the margin of victory has been bigger and bigger. Starting with Rutgers and ending with Michigan State. So who knows? I mean, maybe it'll continue with Purdue, where they beat them by even more points than 49, which is now the high water mark for Michigan this year.
Could be. Not out of the question. I'm definitely taking Michigan. The concern here is Purdue does have a little bit of a different look of an offense, right? Hudson Card, the transfer from Texas, and a quarterback. He can throw it around a bit, and I mean, it's a similar Purdue offense, like pass first offense, as opposed to a lot of the teams Michigan's seen so far this year. I mean, Nebraska, Minnesota, Rutgers, they're ball control teams, run teams. Like Nebraska was sort of an option. Minnesota, I mean, for the whole PJ Fleck era has been run first. That's been a lot of the style of other than Maryland, or actually Michigan hasn't even seen Maryland yet. That was last year. So pretty much every single team. Michigan State presented no problem at all. I mean, you don't even know if they were trying to pass or run first. So I will take Michigan to, especially with everything going on. They're going to be looking to prove a lot of statements. So maybe that quick passing game, and the tempo does catch Michigan off guard a little bit early. We've seen tempo has given Michigan problems over the last couple years, but I think once they make a few adjustments, something like 49-10. So Michigan cover.
I don't like the group think here, but I mean, Jim Harbaugh gave us the playbook against Michigan State, didn't he? I mean, if it would have been for some chippy plays on Michigan State, Spencer Brown diving at the head of the Michigan guy on the ground there, who knows what that score could have been? I mean, 49-0. This Michigan team, amidst all the scandals and everything that have come out, the sign stealing, they are playing angry and have shown that they are very comfortable running up the score the last few weeks here. So certainly not any less reason over the last few days for Michigan to try to prove people wrong. The sign stealing didn't have anything to do with it. If anything, there's more reason now. So I'm taking Michigan not only to cover, but even by more than that, 32. Tony, this is like that one game we played. How high would the margin have to be for you to be willing to bet on Purdue? I mean,
it would have to start with a
39.5. Yeah, 39.5.
It would have to start with a 4.
And that's sometimes, as college football gamblers lose money week after week, you're like, why did I not just bet on Michigan playing Purdue or Ohio State playing so-and-so or Alabama playing, X? It's just like most of the time they end up winning these huge blowout games. So I'm rolling with Michigan as well. Let's go to a rivalry matchup here. Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. Sooners coming off a loss to Kansas last week. They were undefeated prior. 6 points, 6 point favorites over Oklahoma State. Tony, who you got in this one?
Yeah, similar line to Oklahoma, Texas. One of those rivalry games. I took Texas in that one, who was favored by a touchdown. It did not bode well for me. So you would think rivalry game, take the points. No. I am not learning my lesson. I will again take the favorites. Even if this is the last time the Bedlam's on the schedule, Oklahoma scheduled to go to the SEC. But Oklahoma State has only beat Oklahoma outright in Stillwater 2 times in the last 20 years, I believe I saw. So I'm not too worried. It's just how much are you going to cover by? Oklahoma's, their college football playoff chances, not dead yet, but certainly took a hit last week with the loss to Kansas. Everybody's down on Oklahoma. Also, Oklahoma State, winners of 4 straight. Former Michigan, he wasn't even the backup last year. He was 3rd string, sometimes 4th, Alan Bowman. He's actually he's Oklahoma State's quarterback. Doing decently this year, 4 straight wins. But Oklahoma, high-scoring offense, bounce back. I think it's right on that 6 number, but they win by 7 and seal it with a late pick.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State's going to challenge OU. I mean, again, this is a very heated rivalry, and I don't think Oklahoma State's too thrilled with the idea. And certainly Mike Gundy, who's been in the middle of this rivalry for decades now, is thrilled with OU going to the SEC, and I think there's some deep-seated, passions as far as this is concerned. So there'll be extra motivation on OSU's part. Plus, they've won 4 in a row. It seems like they've gotten things together. Offense is clicking. I do trust Brent Venables, to come up with a pretty good scheme. He generally does with OU, and so I think it's going to be a close game. But I don't think OU wins it by more than 6 points at itself. So I'm going with Oklahoma State here.
Oklahoma won back-to-back nail-biters against the aforementioned Texas game by Tony then, and then UCF after that, inferior opponent that they probably should have won by more against, and then barely lost to Kansas, who, has shown they're a pretty good team this year. But I'm betting on a bounce-back week for Oklahoma, a la Notre Dame against USC after losing to Louisville. You see this happen in college football a lot, where a team plays close game. They play with fire, catches up to them, and then they have it all in the line next week. So I just think that Oklahoma is the better team with a lot to play for and a lot on the line here. So I'm going with the Sooners in this one. All right, now on to a team we seem to talk about every week. Tony's favorite, USC Trojans. I'll let you start with this one. 3-point underdogs at home against Washington, who still undefeated, but not even in the top 5 of the first college football playoff rankings, which I'm just now realizing we didn't even mention hardly on this week's show compared with all the Stallions talk. So, Tony, Washington 3-point favorites at USC. Who you got?
Well, there's still a month left to talk about the CFP, right? And we talked about it a little because Michigan was in that top 4 and they are at 3. That's the relevant as far as us talk, because we just needed to know how much obviously their resume, like if they're undefeated, they're of course going to be in. The question is all the other stuff. That said, USC, they held Cal to 49 last week. I was super impressed to hold the high power Cal Golden Bears offense below the 50 mark. There's just a lot of improvement going on in Southern California. You love to see it. It's just pathetic. I wish that they had lost the game just to continue to be right, but the march to 4 or 5 losses continues, and they pick up another one this week, certainly by more than 3 points. Now, I am concerned. You would think this spread would be a little bigger than 3. However, I wonder if USC, because people think of Caleb Williams, because they think of big brand, and they are at home. I mean, it's a decent team in some regards. Like, I can't act like they're total bathwater, but Washington is much better, and just, I mean, will air raid that like into oblivion. Roman Dunze is going for 150 and at least 2 touchdowns. Michael Penix, his Heisman campaign gets back on track, and it will be a 2-horse race between him and J.J. McCarthy from here on out. Washington by 14.
Yeah, I don't have much faith in USC's defense. I mean, they gave up 49 against Cal. Washington is the 9th best scoring offense in the country, averaging more than 40 points. Who knows? Washington can probably pick its number against USC and Alex Grinch, and it's just, one of those things where you just wonder, like, where is USC's defense? Like, how do they expect to hold down Michael Penix and that offense? And I just don't see where it comes from. And so I think, you've been down on USC since the beginning of the season, Tony. We much hated them from the get-go, and you've turned out to be very much right. I mean, they're as fraudulent of a top-level program as you can. I mean, and that defense is such a liability. And going against Washington, which I saw in person against Michigan State, just do whatever they want, and which also has a very Civ-like defense, although it's been somewhat better this year. What makes me think USC could ever stop, Penix, Kalen DeBoer, that offense? I don't know. And so I'm going to go with Washington here.
Yeah, and quickly, it's not a Caleb Williams thing. Caleb Williams is awesome and should be the number 1 pick. It's an everything else thing.
No, defense is just terrible. That's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a huge liability. I mean, he has to constantly overcome the defensive liabilities that they have. I mean, and keep them from, blowing leads or whatever. I mean, it's just like, no lead is safe with USC.
Right.
I mean, were people scared off by that Stanford game that much with Washington almost losing? Like, I just can't figure out why the spread would only be 3. I guess, 2 weeks ago they won. Washington won 15-7 against Arizona State. Then a misleading 42-33 win against Stanford. But I don't see it. How are they going to stop Washington? USC has virtually no home field advantage. You look at the Coliseum; it's like 70% filled every single time. I can't figure out why the spread is only 3, which of course probably means that USC is going to win in a blowout. But
that's the scary part.
But still, I'm taking Washington. Sometimes you just have to trust what you've seen with your eyes so far and not overthink it. But if it does happen, you and I will be sitting here next week, Tony, being like, I knew it. That spread was funky. We should have stayed away from it. So we'll see. Let's move on to probably the game of the week here. LSU at Alabama. These two, have just dogfights year in, year out. Last few years hasn't seemed to been to the same level there, which it kind of peaked with the Joe Burrow LSU team against the Tua Alabama team. It seems like it's been down a little bit in the last few years since, mainly because of LSU, really. But 3-point underdogs at Bama. Reiner, what you got in this matchup?
Well, I will argue, Andrew, that the game last year was pretty darn good. I mean, it came down to that.
It was a big game. It was a great game, but
that
didn't feel like it had the same stakes. It didn't have the same stakes at this point.
No, I mean, it ended up deciding the SEC West last year. The LSU ended up going to play Georgia in the title game, and basically essentially knocked Alabama.
Alabama was number 5 in the country too in that game.
Yeah, and so I bet it's the SEC West has long been like the Big Ten East. I mean, it's one of those divisions that basically settles some aspect of college football in the season. Anyway, I think Alabama, obviously they've won 6 in a row. Really have recovered from the Texas game, the South Florida game. The offense has come along. The defense looks much better. And, again, there's the revenge factor here. Saban's pretty good in these kind of revenge moments. finding a way to exact, whatever retribution is needed, I guess, in the year after they lose a game to an opponent. So because it's at home in Tuscaloosa, and Alabama is going to be extra motivated, I think, in the same way that I feel like Oklahoma State is going to be motivated against Oklahoma. I feel like Alabama is going to have that same fire, and I think they're going to come out pretty strong against LSU and win this game.
Well, the Fighting Reiner Sabans have won 6 straight, as he mentioned, so they're streaking, and you need to. We need to. I know I give Reiner a hard time for always picking Alabama because he covered Alabama. It's a good theory. And if you pick Alabama in every game, like there are a few teams in any sport that you'd rather ride or die with every game if you were planting your flag there. And I am just kidding. And I'm picking Alabama too. They've played much better. It's at home. All the reasons you said. Last year, that overtime loss on the 2-point conversion is just you don't forget those things. For Nick Saban, how sweet would it be? I was as dumb as anyone after South Florida. I was like, is he done? Right? Is this when eventually even he's done? Very much no, they're not done. And
in fact, this might be his best coaching job.
You could argue.
I don't think that this team is prime time by any means.
Wait till
anywhere close to Alabama. This team isn't anywhere close to that. But he's gotten the defense is much better than it was last year, and things are starting to come together offensively for them.
Yeah, if they are able to win this game this week, just the recovery, the finding it. It's so hard for someone like a Nick Saban or in basketball like a Tom Izzo to win any Coach of the Year award, because it's like you can't be Coach of the Year, right? It's like water's wet, obviously Nick Saban's the best coach. However, I think you really like him and Mike Norvell from Florida State, and then Kalen DeBoer, and then maybe Dan Lanning in Oregon, although now they lost. I think that's the short list of Coach of the Year. Ryan Day still on it as well, but Saban should be on it with a win. It would be a great job. So let's wrap this. I got Alabama. Andrew?
I'm going the opposite direction. I'm going with LSU in this one. Jaden Daniels, Sneaky has the second highest QBR in the country behind J.J. McCarthy. So LSU's offense has been rolling. Last 4 games, 62, 48, 49, and 49. And I don't think that this Alabama team can score with LSU, even though LSU's defense is questionable to say the least. I've just seen that Alabama offense look too sloppy at times, and when you're going against a team who can post those kind of offensive scores, those kind of numbers, you can't make mistakes, otherwise you're going to fall too far behind. So I'm taking the 3 points. It could become a lot like last year's game that I seemingly undervalued and come right down to the last score, but I'll take the 3 points in that one.
Well, in fairness, comparing it to Tua against Joe Burrow, nothing's gonna live up to that. Yeah. That could so easily be the AFC Championship game this year.
Yeah.
Right? So your point is well taken, but just because it's fallen off doesn't mean it's not still damn good, because Bama LSU. Well, I guess
because LSU fell off for a few years there with Coach O, and then they kind of just went down a little bit. And I never thought LSU had a national championship caliber team last year, and even Alabama, it seemed questionable for a while, as good as Bryce Young was. So I guess it just didn't. When I was watching that game, it wasn't like, okay, whoever wins this is going to the national title game. It felt like for multiple years there with LSU Alabama.
Right. And this year, the two teams had 3 losses combined in September, right? It felt like the wind was taken out of the sails early. They both since hit their stride, though. And that's what we want, right? You want them playing good ball in November. And so we will see how it all shakes out next week when we talk next. We'll get back to more of a normal recording schedule. It was supposed to be sort of an off week last week with the bye week. Obviously, we had to address certain things. We then pushed back. We didn't do Sunday's episode because we had just recorded on Friday. You get the point. Next week, plan business as usual. Of course, if things we will be fluid should that be necessitated, because we did also not even mention anything about a Jim Harbaugh contract. And we're going to keep not mentioning it because there's discussion around it. It's moved. Hasn't happened yet. Don't be surprised if it does. I think that's what I have to say on that. Reiner, is there anything to add before we say goodbye?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, it was, again, it's a very fluid situation that, who knows where it's going to lead, but we're knee deep in it, and it's isn't going away. That's for sure. It's going to be here for the next few months at least. So strap in, everybody.
Yep. And we'll be here to talk about it. So until then, thanks to everyone. Thanks to Andrew for always helping us. I mean, really leading the show behind the scenes first and foremost, and then joining us on it and providing all of his insight. Thanks to Reiner, as always. Our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, executive editor, Anjanette Delgado, sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. Anyone watching the video version of this, if you saw me mute my camera and take a phone call, it was Kirk, who we could not do anything without. I literally feel as if I could not wake up in the morning and get dressed without calling Kirk first. I don't nearly give him enough kudos for everything he does for us. And then audio engineer Robin Chan, and of course Andrew Burkle, who I already thanked. So thanks everybody. Stay safe. The next time we talk, the clocks will have changed and the real depression will have set in. So be happy until then. Take care. This is Hell Yes.